Hi again. John Urquhart in The Wonders of Prophecy is talking about the text that says that God will deliver Egypt into the hands of the wicked. Ezekiel 30 verse 12. Now he talks about the nationality of these wicked. Not only is the character of the masters of Egypt foretold, but their nationality is also defined. I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hand of strangers. It might be supposed that this is merely a restatement of the prediction which declared that there should no more be a native prince upon the throne of Egypt. But it really carries us farther. The latter prophecy would have been fulfilled had one race, that is, the Persians or the Greeks, for example, continued age after age to lord it over Egypt. It is intimated now, however, that the Egyptians will know the mastery of more than one people. The inheritance will pass from race to race, who all of them will stand in this relationship of strangers to the people over whom they exercise their cruel mastery. We have only to call to mind the well-known antipathy of the Egyptians to foreigners, the contempt in which they held them, and their treatment of their captives in compelling them to toil under the lash of the taskmaster upon their public works, to see the fitness of the doom. They boasted that upon their mighty monuments no Egyptian had labored, and now it is foretold that by the hand of races such as they had loathed and despised and enslaved, they themselves will be judged for their cruelty and pride. When we turn from the prophecy, which says who Egypt's masters will be, and asks of history who they have been, we are answered in the very words of Scripture. They have been strangers. The Persians were succeeded by the Macedonians, these by the Romans, and latterly by the Greeks of the Eastern Empire. The empire fell in Egypt and the East before the Arabian caliphs. About the year 887, the power of the caliphs was succeeded by the reign of the Turamans, their own Janissaries, whom they had called to their aid. The dynasties of the Tulanides, the Fatimites, and the Ibites, that is Aioobits, ruled over Egypt till the year 1250. The Mamalukes, or military slaves of the Turkoman sultans of Egypt, then massacred their masters and took possession of the sovereignty. The Turkish dynasty, or that of the Bassorite Mamalukes, reigned till 1382. The Caucasian race, or that of the Bordjite Mamalukes, ruled there till within these very few years. In 1798, the French abolished the Mameluke aristocracy and made themselves masters of the whole of Egypt. After 2 short years, the French retired when the Mamelukes strove for the sovereignty with the Turks of Constantinople by intrigue and assassination. Mehemet Ali foiled both with their own weapons and founded the present dynasty. An Albanian Turk and a soldier of fortune, he entered Egypt in command of 300 men sent from his native town to assist in expelling the French from Egypt, and step by step, through wiles and blood, he fought his way to the throne. And not only is it true that foreigners have filled the throne, they have held almost every office of emolument and trust. Mehemet Ali, among his many reforms, attempted to change this practice. He appointed native governors with the very liberal intention of allowing the peasants to be ruled by their compatriots instead of the more humiliating custom of subjecting them to foreigners. The change had continued for only 5 years when it was found necessary to return to the old system. And today it is as true as ever that the country is in the hands of strangers. The last point we name is the work of Egypt's masters. Again, Ezekiel 30 verse 12, I will make the land waste and all that is therein by the hands of strangers. The desolation which we have already seen was to fall might have come in many ways. It might have sprung from causes over which man had no control, and it might have fallen in spite of the best efforts of the foreign successors of the pharaohs. But here the story of the desolation is fully told. It will be the result of long and increasing oppression. It will not happen in spite of the efforts of these strangers. It is the work for which they are to come, and when they have passed away, this will remain as the token that they have been. Egypt's native rulers were remembered by the advancement of their country's weal, and by public works and monuments which filled the breast of posterity with a noble pride and emulation. But the memorial of these masters will be waste and deepening desolation. Has the work been done? Is the desolation of Egypt distinctly traceable to the strangers? From every side witnesses arise which testify to the truth of the prediction. The strangers have wasted the land. I have already referred to the neglect of the canals. The revenues which ought to have been, and which would have been, but for the most unprincipled veracity applied to their maintenance, have been withheld, and what might have been fruitful fields have become a desert. What has already been said of the steadily deepening desolation of Egypt has been shown to be the work of its foreign masters, and other strangers than its masters have aided in the work of destruction. In 1801, the English, in order to protect their camp from an attack by the French, cut through the embankment between the Bay of Aboukir and the basin of the former Lake Mauritius, and the salt waters now roll over 40 villages and the cultivated lands which surrounded them. The people have been wasted. Clot Bey, writing in 1840, calculates that one half the population has perished since the time of the Persian conquest. There is no reason whatever, save the continued oppression of the people, why the population should not even now spread out to its ancient dimensions. Were all the land cultivated, which can still be sown, the produce would be sufficient to maintain a population of 8 million, about twice the number of the present inhabitants. Now we know how the population of Egypt has expanded greatly in the last century. The people do not perish, therefore, for lack of room. Their decrease is not simply the consequence of the lands being wasted. It is wrought by the hand of the strangers. The villages are depopulated, first of all, by the conscription. Lane calculated that under Mehemet Ali, every second man out of the whole number fit for military service was taken for the army and navy. And McCone admits that the conscription is still out of all proportion to the military necessities of the country, and a serious hindrance to the progress of agriculture. Another cause of the decrease is the corvee, compulsory labor upon public works and on the estates of the khedive and others whose demands the poor fellahin can neither resist nor gainsay. Some notion of what this means for the peasant may be gained from the story of the Mohammedia canal, as told by Mr. Villiers Stuart. He says the important waterway between the Nile and Egypt's greatest seaport has a sad history and furnishes a terrible illustration of the abuses to which the corvée is liable. It was constructed entirely by forced labor, and the sacrifice of life was frightful. Those who perished were buried in the embankment as the work progressed. Mehemet Ali had commanded all the sheiks in the delta to bring the flower of the population from their villages for the work of excavating a waterway from the Nile to Alexandria. In obedience to this call, 313,000 persons were assembled along its future course, that is, at the rate of 7,825 per mile. But the government had, as usual with forced labor, provided neither food nor tools. The poor wretches had to dig out the canal with their fingers and remove the soil in baskets provided by themselves. As the work progressed and they got below the level of Lake Mauritius, the water oozed in, and they toiled in fetid mud. They were kept at the work by soldiers who lined the banks with bayonets fixed. They had no respite from sunrise to sunset, and they lay in their cotton rags on the banks from sunset to sunrise, half-starved, maltreated, with festering fingers and fever-stricken frames. The tyrant's commands were urgent. In 10 months his wishes were accomplished, and a canal 40 miles long and 200 feet wide was excavated with men's hands. But 23,000 of the poor wretches perished in that time from exhaustion and the cruelty of their taskmasters, and were covered up in the mud of the embankments. If placed lengthways along its course, there would be throughout the route but an interval of 2 yards between the feet of one corpse and the skull of the next, a grim line of sentinels. I once traveled by boat through the Mehemet Canal from Alexandria to Atfa, a distance of 40 miles, but during the entire trip I could not divest myself of the feeling that I was between walls into which the bodies of 23,000 human beings had been built. As I sailed along, the banks seemed to my mind to grow transparent, and I saw nothing but those miles of skeletons, awful trophies of tyranny and cruelty on the one hand, and of human suffering and misery on the other. And this is all from the words of Villiers Stuart, his book, Egypt After the War. I'll put in a link to Neil Postman. Neil Postman, one of the best sociologists of the last generation. His analysis of the cult of progress